Hello, I'm Jeremy Vine, and this is Panorama.
Taliban under attack, confronted at last by the country that helped create them.
We have to fight for our future. It's a question of our life and death. We have to win.
We'll see why with compelling footage from both sides of the front line.
The guerrillas of the Taliban closed the doors of the mosque and picked 7 village elders and cut their throats.
Is the tide now turning against the extremists?
Swat is one of the most beautiful and blessed places on earth, famous for its waterfalls, glaciers and orchards, and more recently for the Taliban. The Pakistani government handed it over to the militants in return for an end to the fighting, and a shadow fell over its valleys and towns. Schools were closed and burned, local leaders kidnapped and killed. It was a terrible mistake, and one the Pakistani army is having to pay a high price to put right. John Sweeney's report contains some graphic images.
21st century firepower against a medieval ideology. At stake, control of Pakistan, a country with a nuclear bomb.
So this is how the Pakistani army are bringing the fight to the Taliban. Helicopter gunships. And these two are going off to bandit country right now.
I'm heading north to a ridge held by the Pakistani army. Pakistan is now at war with the monster it helped create. Just over the horizon, British and American forces in Afghanistan are pushing the Taliban and their backers in Al-Qaeda this way. The Pakistani army are pressing the Pakistani Taliban the other way. That's the theory. But you can hide an army in these hills.
They are on the skyline, the main top,
Yes.
top.
Yeah, not in the distance, but this one here, yeah?
Sometimes they come,
Yeah.
they fire and they go back.
They call this running rotor, a pit stop so fast they keep the blades running just in case.
Their laboratories,
Yes,
training school was here,
right.
laboratories were here.
The laboratories.
Yes,
What were they doing in the laboratories?
there were the explosive, they were making explosive and
Suicide bombs?
bombs and IEDs, jackets. They were preparing that. If we destroyed that,
For the army, taking out suicide bomb factories is target number one.
And that's our bus. We can't hang around here.
and they cannot.
The Battle of Swat Valley matters because it is close to the heartland of Pakistan, and it's the first time that the army has taken the Taliban head-on. The army's goal? To take Mingora, Swat's capital, back and then push north, following the river upstream to the Talib stronghold of Matta, using helicopters to resupply their main base at Kwazakela. The stakes could not be higher.
In a way, you can say that this could be the beginning of a civil war if Pakistan is not careful and corrects itself by bringing about good governance. So we have to fight for our future. You know, it's a question of our life and death. So I think we have to win.
It's always edgy being up in the air in Swat. Here, a local cameraman working behind Taliban lines was able to film them shooting at something in the sky they didn't like the look of. Sometimes they're on target. Another cameraman on a different day filmed Taliban bullets piercing the hull of this helicopter. One of the soldiers was hit in the arm. He survived, and the chopper was patched up to fly another day. But going by road isn't that much better. This is the main road between Islamabad and Swat. An aid convoy, escorted by the military, has been ambushed by Talib gunmen. An army cameraman catches the chaos. One soldier dies, and this man, a civilian, is injured. After the ambush, the army moves on, firing. The same journey another day. We don't know who opened fire on these vehicles or what happened to the people in them. But these two burnt-out army tanks look like Taliban trophies. The idea that defeating the Taliban is going to be a walkover doesn't sit well with these pictures. Unlike the army, the Taliban can submerge into the local population, becoming invisible. But for those living under their thumb in Swat, they were all too real. Last year, the Taliban seized complete control of Matta and the surrounding area. The sign at this police station says, "Ready to serve you at all times." Nearly right. The police quit Matta in such a hurry, they left their commando uniforms behind, and an armoured personnel carrier. It's true to say that many people in Swat were fed up with government neglect and the state's slow, corrupt system of justice. But life under Taliban rule was something else.
The Taliban said they are bringing Islam and forbade women from going shopping or drawing water. They put up signs forbidding women from leaving the house without wearing a burqa. Even when we went out wearing burqas with the men from our family, they still insulted us.
And the dark side of Taliban law? Images shot behind the lines last year revealed 2 executed Pakistani soldiers. One headless corpse has been left on the ground for the world to see. Another soldier's body lies unburied in the heat of the day, his watch still ticking. Here, the Taliban are running a checkpoint, and close by, another corpse lies unburied. The message? Don't mess with the Taliban, or we will kill you too. Respect for the dead doesn't get a look in. What's so bizarre about the Taliban is that they kill journalists, bomb video shops and cinemas, ban cameras, and yet they were happy to show off. Here's one Talib having his hair done. The big Talib warlord in Swat is Mullah Fazlullah. He's also got his own radio station, hence his nickname, Mullah FM. And he's big in video. His Fatah label pumps out Talib snuff movies on DVD. Here is Mullah FM's thought for the day. It's hard to think of anyone who could do a deal with the Taliban. Well, the rulers of Pakistan did. For a decade, Pakistan's military rulers backed the Taliban in Afghanistan with training, weapons and gold. They turned a blind eye to the creeping Talibanization of Swat. Earlier this year, the new democratically elected government cut a deal with the Taliban. They could have Sharia law in Swat, provided they put down their arms. They didn't. Soon, some 5,000 Taliban fighters were in Swat's capital, Mingora. The deal appalled many, including former senior army officers.
I think it was total appeasement on the part of the government because they just gave in to them. And I think the militants realized that the government had become so weak and it was no position to sort of oppose them.
I asked a former minister why they made an agreement with the Taliban.
How could you do a deal with the devil? It was the right thing at that time. And I think it paid its dividends.
How so? Because critics will say, no, that's nonsense.
But at least that agreement exposed it. Since that agreement was there and they failed on their part, today I am sure, and everybody is sure, that 99% of people of Malakand are against Talibans. And that is why I think the operation is going on successfully.
In the past, the Pashtun, the clan of the mountains which straddle Pakistan and Afghanistan, had some sympathy for the Taliban's message of a Puritan society. Not anymore. 3 events in particular turned the public mood against the Talibs. The first is this, the flogging of a teenage girl. In the eyes of the Taliban, this 17-year-old girl had broken Talib law. It is not clear why she's being flogged, but the girl's family have said that she had committed no crime, but had been punished because she refused a forced marriage with a Talib soldier. Whatever the truth, her screams are real enough. The second outrage is a series of beheadings by the Taliban of army prisoners, sequences so horrific that we can't show them. The Taliban hate Sufism, an ancient brand of mystic Islam. The third horror is what happened to one Sufi holy man who stood up to the Taliban for months. Faced with a standoff, the Taliban suggested talks in a mosque. The story is told by a follower of Pir Samiullah who dare not show his face. If the Taliban find him, they'll kill him.
And killed
The guerrillas of the Taliban closed the doors of the mosque and picked 7 village elders and cut their throats. They screamed. It was so horrible.
Hundreds of Talib fighters came for the holy man and his most loyal followers and killed him. The next day, the Taliban dug up his corpse, strung him up, and executed his supporters. We cannot begin to show the whole sequence of what the Taliban did, but Pakistani TV can and did. All 3 outrages played out on Pakistani TV shocked the whole country. The Taliban had enjoyed some popular support before, but not anymore.
I mean, they are such a disgrace to humanity, to Islam, to Pakistan. We were too lenient with them. We allowed them to grow and continue to get strong, and I think we are paying a very heavy price for that.
Here, mainstream mullahs and imams take to the streets, declaring that the Taliban are not Islamic. Mullah Fazl Karim took part in the demo.
The Taliban are against the principles of Islam. Our Prophet strictly forbade the sowing of dissent and creating of chaos or lawlessness in the country.
He's a brave man. One cleric, a friend of his, who spoke out against the Taliban, was murdered 2 weeks ago. The Battle of Swat has led to one of the world's fastest growing refugee crises. More than 1 million people displaced in a month. In the heat of the Pakistani summer, which gets up to more than 40 degrees centigrade, 110 degrees Fahrenheit, people will die in the open. It's worse for the people from Swat, used to a cooler mountain climate. Some are fair, like this little girl. I asked some children from Mingora what they wanted to do when they grew up.
Policeman. A doctor? Yeah.
Teacher?
Pilot.
A pilot? Let's learn English playgroup.
Butterfly.
B for?
BUTTERFLY, butterfly.
Acha.
FLOWER, flower. I want education.
She won't get any under the Taliban.
GATE.
A girls' school in Mingora.
ORANGE. Orange.
One of 170 girls' schools destroyed by the Taliban.
Snake, SNAKE.
And Z for?
Zebra.
Well done! Everybody clap. Hey. And ordinary life goes on. At this shrine, Sikh refugees from Swat are housed in rooms where pilgrims normally stay. Visiting the refugees are the family of the Wali of Swat, the ancestral lords of the valley. They're Muslim, the refugees here are Sikh, but everyone is homesick for the valley.
Such a peaceful place, where all of us coexisted so happily. And now we can't go there. We have no news of our homes. Our mobile phones don't work, our landlines don't work. We can't go there. It's a terrible feeling not to be able to go home.
We are all here because everybody is fearing for their lives.
Are you afraid of the Taliban?
I would be lying if I say no. Yes, because 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, a very young 41-year-old first cousin of mine was mercilessly assassinated by them. So I have been a victim of their violence.
As in all wars, ordinary people get caught in the middle. Red-hot shrapnel, fired by the army, can't tell the difference between a Talib and a farmer in his fields. Two widows, both victims of the Battle of Swat Valley.
He was fired at by a plane and there were bullet holes in his neck. We suffered because of the army. They didn't warn us to leave our homes. Suddenly the shooting started and houses were hit by mortar shells. Many died that day.
And this woman's husband, a soldier, was blown up by a Talib suicide bomber 3 months ago, along with 25 other soldiers.
The army are also Muslims. Was my husband not a believer? He was a Muslim. I am grieving because of the Taliban.
The war has caused the Taliban to reply with their weapon of choice. Another night, another suicide bomb, this time in Islamabad. What happened was the suicide bomber came along, he was challenged by the cops, they fired at him, he pulled his trigger, boom. 3 men died. The Taliban play on everyone's fear of suicide bombs in their horror videos. Here is a Talib baking the ingredients for a suicide bomb. And now the bomb is packed in this van. This young Talib is the delivery boy. He's been told he's going to paradise. He blew up Charbar police station, killing 7. This is how a medieval ideology can take on a 21st century army. But now mullahs are speaking out against suicide bombers.
In my opinion, they are neither Muslims nor human beings. 6 months ago, we issued a fatwa that in Pakistan, suicide attacks are forbidden under Sharia law.
Why has it taken so long, people like you, religious leaders in Pakistan, to stand up and say openly the Taliban are utterly wrong?
We tried to engage them through dialogue and negotiation and ask them to stop their terrorist activities. However, They have gone beyond all limits and they are trying to disgrace Islam.
Back in Swat, I'm shown the aftermath of a suicide bomb attack at an army post in Kwazakela, across the river from Mata. On the other side of the road is a mosque and a water tap where children from the village queue up to fill their buckets.
A land cruiser came from the other side and the sentry told him to get aside because it's curfew time and go back.
Yes.
He, rather than switching off or going back, he accelerated and bypassed the sentry and dashed this side.
Yes.
The kids were taking water from this place. You see that water pump?
Yes.
The kid was working?
Yes.
There were 3-4 kids, they died there.
This isn't just a battle of bullets and bombs and guns. It's also about the heart and soul of Islam. Now, the Taliban say that their version of Islam is the true one, the pure one. Well, this is a mosque, and it was destroyed by a suicide bomb, and 6 kids were killed. And people here say that has got absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with Islam.
At Kwazakela, the army has a prize captive. He's just 15 years old.
So what happened to you?
At morning 8 o'clock, I was going to school and listening music on mobile. And 3 Taliban were come and catch me. And
He said he'd been listening to Bollywood film music, and that's enough to get arrested by the Taliban.
He said to me that you bomber, self-bomber.
He wanted you to become a suicide bomber?
Yes, sir.
And you said...
I love with life and I...
He told me that when the army bombed the Taliban, he ran away and made it to the army's protection. He dare not go back to his family.
I ran away from it.
So all necessary precaution has been taken. People stay on in their homes. It is good enough. They'll not get killed. As long as they do not harbor militants.
General Sajjad watches over his offensive against the Taliban stronghold of Mata. They're attacking the outskirts and pressing on to the town centre. The army takes 6 prisoners. As Taliban simply means students in Urdu, the army has another phrase for them: miscreants. One miscreant said that he was kidnapped by the Taliban.
I was studying at the local madrasa. I had just finished my afternoon prayers. 2 Taliban came and said, "Come with us. You're going to fight the army." And they took me to their training camp. If I hadn't agreed, they'd have killed me. There were lots of other men being trained in that camp.
A second prisoner claims he was innocent and had been held by the army when he returned to look after his family's livestock. A third had blood on his shirt. The army said he was an executioner. And then the prisoners were taken away. It was impossible to check out their stories. General Sajjad reckons that the army now controls 85% of Swat and has killed or captured 1,100 Taliban, including some foreign fighters. Again, we had no way of checking this out. With my own eyes, I saw no dead Taliban at all. If the general is right, there are still nearly 4,000 Taliban out there, which is a lot.
It's a difficult terrain, mountainous country with rugged mountains, high mountain passes, steep slopes, mountain gorges.
Perfect place to hide.
Perfect place to hide and ideal place to wage an insurgency operation, and almost very difficult place to prosecute counter-insurgency operations because miscreants can hide, can melt away.
Just beyond this position, deep in Swat, lies the last known location of Mullah FM. They got so close to him they even captured his medicine. He's an asthmatic. Close, but Mullah FM is still on the run. Inside the army base, some of the men take time off to attend the soldiers' mosque for evening prayers.
Wars don't stop at night. Now, the Taliban are on the other side of the river. A couple of weeks ago, they were in Mata. They've been cleared out of there, but they've gone up into the hills.
On this Talib video, they're showing off their firepower. These are 107mm rockets, and I can tell you, they use them for real. Good morning, Pakistan. We are woken up by 9 rockets falling on the army base. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. The last rocket lands 75 meters from where we are sleeping. 3 soldiers hurt, 2 seriously.
They are imputing his this leg.
He's lost his leg.
Yes, he has lost his leg, probably one hand as well.
The rocket was fired from this ridgeline on the right in the hills above Mata, Mullah FM territory.
Look at this stuff.
See this shrapnel? Proof that we were on the wrong end of a 107mm rocket. Some minutes later, the soldiers told me that the most severely injured man has died.
Listen. Silence. Now, in my view, that's good soldiery by the Pakistani army. Their base has been hit, they've taken casualties, rockets have been coming in from the Taliban.
But they're not firing back indiscriminately. This unit, at least, is serious about avoiding collateral damage. There's nothing we can do for him. But now the second injured man, the company Havildar or Sergeant Major, has stabilised and needs surgery back in the army hospital at Rawalpindi. His stretcher is placed on the coffin of his fellow soldier. They've taken the machine guns off our chopper to make it go as fast as possible. If the Taliban fire at us, we can't shoot back. Some people believe that the army still isn't taking the fight to the Taliban, but are just engaged in a shadow play. From what I could see in Swat Valley, the army is fighting and it's taking casualties. The army says they're winning, but history tells us to be wary of writing off the Taliban. Pakistan is paying for its deal with the Taliban, and no one can say just how terrible the final bill in blood will be.
John Sweeney in the Swat Valley, and the latest reports from there are that some people are beginning to return to their homes, and the Pakistani army says it is taking the fight against the Taliban even further, right up to the borders with Afghanistan. The Taliban say they will respond with yet more suicide attacks in Pakistani cities. You can read more about the fight against the Taliban on our website.
Next week, we ask if the UK is doomed after 10 years of devolution for the Scots. And on Sunday at 7 p.m. on BBC Two, This World, The Madoff Hustle, the inside story of the biggest financial con of all time.
Tonight at 10, MPs elect a new Commons Speaker. Will he be able to restore Parliament's battered reputation? And who said the big bankers' bonuses were dead? Meet RBS's £9.6 million man.
And up next here on BBC One, it's Waking the Dead.